welcome to Katia Plant Scientist Squash Patch. As you all know, I'm wild about squash, and this is one of my 3 winter squash gardens. Yes, count them, 3. I have videos on the other ones if you want to check them out. This is my traditional squash patch. This is an area of ground that has been dug over and had chicken manure and bloodfish and bone meal fertilizer added before the young squash plants were planted out in the late spring. I lost count of how many squash plants I have here, but I think there are about 5 or 6 mature squash plants filling out this area. The design of this garden is such that we don't have many problems with weeds, and it's more hygienic. Before the squash are planted out, it's covered with a layer of weed suppressant cloth with holes cut out in there for the squash plants to go into. That means that the squash fruits are not in contact with the dirt, and there's less chance of them going rotten or being attacked by pests while they mature. The squash are not yet ready to harvest, but I can show you what they're doing at this point in their development. So over here we have a lovely French pumpkin called rouge vif. That means red balloon. And this is a less mature example of a rouge vif. Let me show you what this will look like once it gets a little more mature in its development. What could be behind here? Oh my goodness, what a monster. Look at the size of that thing. Whoa, that's one of the biggest squashes I've ever grown. So this pumpkin is pretty much its mature size, but we need to let it sit on the vine until its skin becomes so hard that you cannot make a mark on it with your fingernail. That's how you can tell a squash is ready to harvest. Ideally, you want to leave the squash in the vine until the vine dries up and goes brown. That means the squash will have had the optimum time to mature and develop before harvesting and curing for the winter. We also have a marrow. Marrow is a colloquial word for a courgette or zucchini that is allowed to develop into a hard-skinned winter squash. This is actually a gold rush courgette, but it's been allowed to turn into a big old winter squash. It's still developing a hard skin, but I hope that this will be a delicious and beautiful squash to enjoy in the winter. Please come over here to see another squash. Over here we have one of my very favorite squashes, the blue-skinned crown prince squash. Look at it. Look at that silvery beauty. You could imagine Cinderella going to the bowl and something like that. This is an absolutely delicious squash with the firmest, tastiest flesh that almost tastes like pumpkin pie, even if you just roast it and eat it au naturel. You can also see next to it that this is the weed suppressant cloth, this black material here that stops weeds from growing and also helps keep the squash nice and clean as they develop. I'd also like to show you a couple of squash blossoms while we're at it. This is a male squash flower. So as you can see, like other cucurbits, it's a male flower because it just has a stem behind it and no fruit. Inside, we have a flower with a lovely, soft, kind of furry petals here. And inside, it only has pollen, so it's only an anther in there. The anther is the so-called male part of the flower. It's also called a stamen. Let me show you a female flower. This is a female flower, and as you can see, it has a fruit attached. Whoop, there we go. This one has a fruit attached. Now this one's flower is a little bit closed up, but let me show you what's inside there. Don't worry, this doesn't harm it. So you can see inside, this one has the pistil. See how it's kind of shaped like antlers? That's how I think of it as being. See, they're sort of shaped like antlers, and this is where the pollen lands, which fertilizes the fruit and stimulates it to start growing into a mature pumpkin. Thank you so much for joining me on this tour of one of my 3 squash gardens. If you have an extra space like this in your garden, It's so easy and low maintenance to grow a big community of winter squash like this. I highly recommend it if you would like to produce fruits that are beautiful home decor for the autumn season, as well as delicious and nutritious treats to enjoy all winter. Thank you for joining me, and stay curious about plants, everyone.